The Companies Act 1956. Section 4. Meaning of holding company and meaning of subsidiary company. Today let us refresh our understanding about holding company and subsidiary company. When do we call a company a holding company? When do we call a company subsidiary company? A holding company may become a subsidiary company in some situations. A subsidiary company may also become a holding company in some situations. We are going to understand how a company is identified, how a company is deemed, how a company is judged as a holding company, how a company is deemed as a subsidiary company. What are these conditions? On what conditions a company is identified as a holding company? On what conditions or on what provisions a company is identified as a subsidiary company or deemed as a subsidiary company? Section 4 carries provisions where a company is identified, where a company is deemed as a holding company, and where a company is deemed as a subsidiary company. Section 4 explains us the situations, the conditions, and where a company is not to be deemed as a holding company and where a company is not to be deemed as subsidiary company. Let us focus our attention in understanding or refreshing our understanding about the meaning of holding company and the meaning of subsidiary company. Before we enter into section 4 of the Companies Act 1956, let us go back to section 2 where we may find references of holding company and subsidiary company. Let us understand what clause 19 of section 2 says about holding company. Clause 19 of section 2 says holding company means a holding company within the meaning of section 4. Clause 47 of section 2 says about subsidiary company. Clause 47 of section 2 says subsidiary company or subsidiary means a subsidiary company within the meaning of section 4. See how holding company and subsidiary company are defined. So clause 19 of section 2 and clause 47 of section 2, both clauses are referring to section 4. So here let us go to section 4. Subsection 1 of section 4. For the purposes of this act, always we need to remember this expression, for the purposes of this act. This understanding, this definition, these conditions relating to define the holding company, relating to define subsidiary company are concerned or oriented only towards the Companies Act 1956. That is what we need to conclude here from this expression, that for the purposes of this act, a company shall, subject to the provisions of subsection 3, be deemed to be a subsidiary of another. Underline. There is a condition subject to the provisions of subsection 3. This expression also we need to understand. Subject to the provisions of subsection 3. What provisions subsection 3 carries? We may understand after some time, but for time being, let us focus our attention on subsection 1 of section 4. Subject to the provisions of subsection 3. Subject to the provisions of subsection 3, for the purposes of this act, a company shall be deemed to be subsidiary of another, but only if that other controls the composition of its directors. See, if a company controls the composition of board of directors of another company, then that another company becomes subsidiary of the first company. Again, assume that there are two companies. First company controls the board of directors, or first company controls the composition of board of directors of second company. Second company becomes, or second company is deemed subsidiary company of first company. So naturally, first company is deemed as a holding company of second company. This is what we need to understand from clause A of subsection 1 of section 4. It says, subject to the provisions of subsection 3, for the purposes of this act, a company shall be deemed to be a subsidiary of another if that other controls the composition of its board of directors. So it is clear, as we were understanding from an illustration, where first company controls the composition of board of directors of second company. Second company becomes a subsidiary of the first company, and first company is deemed to be holding company. Let us have some more understanding about this terminology. Let us have some illustrations. See, a holding company need to be a member of its subsidiary. Is it essential? A holding company need to be a member of its subsidiary. There is another understanding. A holding company need not be a member of its subsidiary. This is another understanding. Let us try to differentiate where it functions. For illustration, take that there is a company called Hyderabad Papers Limited, which holds more than half in nominal value of equity share capital of Chennai Cements Limited. Again, there is a company called Hyderabad Papers Limited, which holds more than half in nominal value of equity share capital of Chennai Cements Limited. Underline. Hyderabad Papers Limited holds more than half in nominal value of equity share capital of Chennai Cements Limited. By virtue of this transaction, Hyderabad Papers Limited is deemed or considered as holding company of Chennai Cements Limited. Other side, Chennai Cements Limited is identified as subsidiary company of Hyderabad Papers Limited. There is another company called Bombay Biscuits Limited. This Bombay Biscuits Limited is the holding company of Hyderabad Papers Limited. Underline. So Hyderabad Papers Limited is holding company of Chennai Cements Limited. Now the new development is Bombay Biscuits Limited is the holding company of Hyderabad Papers Limited. Chennai Cements Limited is subsidiary company of Hyderabad Papers Limited, as we understand. Consequently, it is also a subsidiary company of Bombay Biscuits Limited. Again, Chennai Cements Limited is subsidiary company of Hyderabad Papers Limited, as we understand earlier. Consequently, Chennai Cements Limited is also a subsidiary company of Bombay Biscuits Limited, since Bombay Biscuits Limited holds more than half in nominal value of equity share capital of Hyderabad Papers Limited. It is by virtue of clause C of subsection 1 of section 4, Bombay Biscuits Limited being holding company of Hyderabad Papers Limited, Bombay Biscuits Limited controls the composition of board of directors of Hyderabad Papers Limited. Similarly, Hyderabad Papers Limited being holding company of Chennai Cements Limited, Hyderabad Papers Limited controls the composition of board of directors of Chennai Cements Limited. You know who are controlling Hyderabad Papers Limited. It is Bombay Biscuits Limited. Hyderabad Papers Limited controls the composition of board of directors of Chennai Cements Limited. You may notice here that Bombay Biscuits Limited is not a member of Chennai Cements Limited. Even then, Bombay Biscuits Limited can control the composition of board of directors of Chennai Cements Limited through Hyderabad Papers Limited. Underline. Here again, let us repeat. Bombay Biscuits Limited is not a member of Chennai Cements Limited. Even then, Bombay Biscuits Limited can control the composition of board of directors of Chennai Cements Limited through Hyderabad Papers Limited. Here, let us recollect some basic conditions. Hyderabad Papers Limited is a member of Chennai Cements Limited. Hyderabad Papers Limited also holds more than half in nominal value of equity share capital of Chennai Cements Limited. Underline. Again, Hyderabad Papers Limited is a member of Chennai Cements Limited. Hyderabad Papers Limited also holds more than half in nominal value of equity share capital of Chennai Cements Limited. It is clear for us. Above both conditions prompt us to judge that Hyderabad Papers Limited is both a member of Chennai Cements Limited and controls the composition of board of directors of Chennai Cements Limited. Here we can reckon Hyderabad Papers Limited as holding company, Chennai Cements Limited as subsidiary company. When it comes to Bombay Biscuits Limited, it is similar to above conditions, like Bombay Biscuits Limited is a member of Hyderabad Papers Limited. Bombay Biscuits Limited also holds more than half in nominal value of equity share capital of Hyderabad Papers Limited. Above both conditions prompt us to consider that Bombay Biscuits Limited is both a member of Hyderabad Papers Limited and controls the composition of board of directors of Hyderabad Paper Limited. Here we can reckon Bombay Biscuits Limited has holding company, Hyderabad Papers Limited as subsidiary company. Here an interesting point, you need to note that Bombay Biscuits Limited also controls Chennai Cements Limited, though it is not a member of Chennai Cements Limited but through Hyderabad Papers Limited. Underline. An interesting point, you need to note that Bombay Biscuits Limited also controls Chennai Cements Limited, though it is not a member of Chennai Cements Limited but through Hyderabad Papers Limited. It may be clear to all of us from the above illustration. Let us have another illustration. There are two companies called Andhra Sugars Limited and Kerala Milks Limited. Both are subsidiary companies of Bombay Holding Limited. Repeat. Andhra Sugars Limited and Kerala Milks Limited. Both are subsidiary companies of Bombay Holdings Limited. Andhra Sugars Limited holds 20% of paid up equity share capital of Royala Soaps Limited, whereas Kerala Mills Limited holds 32% of paid up equity share capital of Royala Soaps Limited. Again, let us repeat it. Andhra Sugar Limited holds 20% of equity paid capital of Royala Soaps Limited, whereas Kerala Mills Limited holds 32% of paid up equity share capital of Royala Soaps. So total comes to 52%. 52% of paid up share capital is held by Andhra Sugars Limited and Kerala Mills Limited. We know it. You also may be aware of it that both are subsidiary companies of Bombay Holdings Limited. So together both hold more than half of paid up share capital of Royal Soaps Limited. You know, both are subsidiary companies of Bombay Holdings Limited. Now with this development, Royal Soaps Limited becomes subsidiary company of Bombay Holdings Limited. Again, now with this development, Royal Soaps Limited becomes subsidiary company of Bombay Holdings Limited. Though it doesn't hold directly anything in Royal Soaps Limited. Another interesting point, note here that neither Andhra Sugars Limited nor Kerala Milks Limited singly hold more than half of paid up capital of Royal Soaps Limited, but together they hold. Both are subsidiary companies of Bombay Holdings Limited. This we need to remember. Again, see, let us go back to clause A of subsection 1 of section 4. Subject to the provisions of subsection 3, for the purposes of this act, a company shall be deemed to be a subsidiary of another, but only if that other controls the composition of its board of directors. We were referring to illustrations and were trying to understand about controlling the composition of board of directors of some other company. So first company controls the composition of board of directors of second company. In such a situation, first company is deemed as a sub-holding company and second company is deemed as a subsidiary company of first company. Let us go to clause B of subsection 1 of section 4. The other condition, if this condition gets satisfied, a company also deemed as a holding company. There are three conditions. If any conditions get satisfied, a company is considered holding company, other side another company is considered as subsidiary company. Let us go to second condition, that is clause B of subsection 1 of section 4. For the purposes of this act, a company shall be deemed a subsidiary of another. A company shall be deemed a subsidiary of another where the first mentioned company is an existing company. Again, the first mentioned company is an existing company in respect of which the holders of preference shares issued before the commencement of this act have the same voting rights in all respects of the holders of equity shares, exercises or controls more than half of the total voting power of such company. There is another subcondition where the first mentioned company is any other company holds more than half in nominal value of its equity share capital. In illustrations, our attention was focused on paid up equity share capital. Let's repeat it. A company shall be deemed as a subsidiary company where the other company holds more than half more than half in nominal value of its paid up equity share capital. Assume that first company holds more than half in nominal value of equity share capital of second company. So second company is deemed subsidiary company of first company and first company is deemed as a holding company of second company. You may be doubting, we were reading earlier term preference share capital. Yes, those days preference shares were having voting powers in all respects as the holders of equity shares. So it is taking into consideration if at all there is any such situation where preference shares were issued which were carrying voting rights in all respects as holders of equity shares. Here, in such a situation, if first company holds more than half of the total voting power of such company means second company through preference share capital. Second company is deemed as a subsidiary company of first company. First company is deemed as a holding company of second company. This situation is very rare, but the Companies Act has taken into consideration if at all any such situation where preferences are issued is considered here. So most of the cases only equity shares will be there. Let us repeat it. Subject to the provisions of subsection 3, see, you are aware subsection 1 brings us 3 conditions. If any one condition gets satisfied, we may deem a company subsidiary, another company as a holding company. So first condition we came across, that is subject to the provisions of subsection 3, for the purposes of this act, a company shall be deemed to be a subsidiary of another if that other controls the composition of its board of directors. It means if first company controls the composition of board of directors of second company, first company is deemed a holding company and second company is deemed subsidiary company. Let us go to second condition. If second condition gets satisfied, a company is deemed as a holding company, another company is deemed as subsidiary company. Let us go to second condition, what it says. Subject to the provisions of subsection 3, for the purposes of this act, a company shall be deemed to be a subsidiary company of another, where the first mentioned company is an existing company, underline, where the first mentioned company is an existing company in respect of which the holders of preference shares issued before the commencement of this act have the same voting rights in all respects as the holders of equity shares, exercises or controls more than half of the total voting power of such company. Before the commencement of this Companies Act 1956, there were situations where companies were issuing preference shares which carry the same voting rights in all respects as the holders of equity shares. Assume that first company holds preference shares more than half of the total voting power of such company. Such company means second company. In such a situation, first company is deemed holding company and second company is deemed subsidiary company. Underline here preference shares. The situation is very rare. Taking into consideration such situation, the Companies Act 1956 has referred preference shares also. Actually, most of the situations will carry share capital, equity share capital. Let us go to the other condition in clause B of subsection 1. Here, that other company, the first mentioned company is a subsidiary of where the first mentioned company is another company holds more than half in nominal value of its equity share capital. So, the first company holds more than half in nominal value of equity share capital of second company. First company is deemed holding company and second company is deemed subsidiary company. There is third condition. Assume that if this third condition gets satisfied, a company may also be deemed as a holding company, another company is going to be deemed as a subsidiary company. First mentioned company is a subsidiary of any company which is the other subsidiary company. Here we were having illustration earlier also that where we were referring that Hyderabad Papers Limited holding more than half in nominal value of equity share capital of Chennai Cements Limited. So naturally Hyderabad Papers Limited is deemed as a holding company and Chennai Cements Limited is deemed as subsidiary company. We already come across. So next development is Bombay Biscuits Limited is the holding company of Hyderabad Papers Limited. This is a very interesting point. In such a situation, Chennai Cements Limited, being subsidiary company of Hyderabad Papers Limited, also treated as subsidiary company of Bombay Biscuits Limited. This is what here clause C refers. First mentioned company is a subsidiary of any company which is that other subsidiary. That is again read it. Section 4, meaning of holding company and meaning of subsidiary company. Subject to the provisions of subsection 3, for the purposes of this act, a company shall be deemed to be a subsidiary of another, but only if that other controls the composition of its board of directors. A company shall be deemed to be a subsidiary of another, but only if that other, where the first mentioned company is an existing company in respect of which the holders of preference shares issued before the commencement of this act have the same voting rights in all respects as the holders of equity shares and exercises and controls more than half of the total voting power of such company. Now let us go to next, where the first mentioned company is any other company holds more than half in nominal value of its equity share capital. There is third condition. Any one of condition if it is met, if it is satisfied, the definition of holding company and definition of subsidiary company gets recognized. Third condition is first mentioned company is subsidiary of any company which is that other subsidiary. Here three conditions we come across. Subsection 1 says if any one condition gets satisfied, we may deem a company as subsidiary as holding company and another company as subsidiary company. Let us go to subsection 2 of section 4. For the purposes of subsection 1, underline, for the purposes of subsection 1, the composition of a company's board of directors shall be deemed to be controlled by another company if but only if that other company by the exercise of some power exercisable by it at its discretion, without the consent or without the concurrence of any other person, can appoint or remove the holders of all or majority of the directorships. But for the purposes of this provision, that other company shall be deemed to have power to appoint to a directorship with respect to which any of the following conditions is satisfied. That is to say, that a person cannot be appointed thereto without the exercise in his favor by that other company of such a power as aforesaid. Next, that other person's appointment thereto follows necessarily from his appointment as a director or manager or to any other office or employment that other company, or that the directorship is held by an individual nominated by that other company or a subsidiary thereof. Subsection 2 brings us three situations. It is going to explain us a company controls the composition of board of directors of another company. How we need to understand it? So here, when first company controls the composition of board of directors of second company, the first company can exercise the power exercisable by it at its discretion without the consent or concurrence of any other person. Underline. So first company can exercise power exercisable by it at its discretion. How? Without the consent, without the concurrence of any other person. It can appoint the holders of all majority of the directorships. It can remove the holders of all or a majority of the directorships of subsidiary company. So for the purposes of this provision, we need to understand a director cannot be appointed in second company without the power exercisable by first company. A person's appointment to second company needs or follows necessarily from his appointment as director or manager or to any other office or employment in that other company. Means any appointment of a director, any appointment of manager, any appointment of any other officer in second company requires and needs consent by the first mentioned company. The directorship is held by an individual nominated by that other company or a subsidiary thereof. So control is in the hands of first mentioned company. It can exercise its power at its discretion. How? Without the consent or concurrence of second company. This is we are able to understand from subsection 2 of section 4. Let us go to subsection 3. Subsection 3, you may recollect, it is referred in subsection 1 as subject to the provisions of subsection 3. Underline. Subject to the provisions of subsection 3, for the purposes of this act, a company shall be deemed to be a subsidiary of another. See, subject to the provisions of subsection 3. We were referring what were they, what are those provisions of subsection 3. Let us understand the provisions of subsection 3. In determining whether one company is a subsidiary of another, in determining whether one company is a subsidiary of another, any shares held or power exercisable by that other company in a fiduciary capacity shall be treated as not held or exercisable by it. Underline. In a fiduciary capacity, any shares held or power exercisable by that other company in a fiduciary capacity shall be treated as not held or exercisable by it. You need to correlate provisions of subsection 1 so that you may easily understand subsection 3 conditions. Another clause B of subsection 3, subject to provisions of clauses C and D. Subject to provisions of clauses C and D, any shares held or power exercisable by any person as a nominee for that other company, except where that is concerned only in a fiduciary capacity, shall be treated as held or exercisable by that other company. See, this we need to determine whether one company is a subsidiary of another. This another. Subject to the provisions of clauses C and D, any shares held or power exercisable by or by a nominee for a subsidiary of that other company not being a subsidiary which is concerned only in a fiduciary capacity shall be treated as held or exercisable by that other company. Always remember, in subsection 3 we are coming repeatedly an expression fiduciary capacity. If anything is held, if anything is exercisable in fiduciary capacity, we need to ignore. See, third one, clause C of subsection 3. In determining whether one company is a subsidiary of another, any shares held or power exercisable by any person by virtue of the provisions of any debentures of the first mentioned company or of a trust deed for securing any issue of such debentures shall be disregarded. Clause D of section 3. Any shares held or power exercisable by or by a nominee for that other or its subsidiary shall be treated as not held or exercisable by that other. If the ordinary business in the ordinary business of that other or its subsidiary, as the case may be, includes the business includes the lending of money and the shares are held or the power is exercisable as aforesaid by way of security only for the purposes of a transaction entered into in the ordinary course of their business. See, when we are deeming or when we are judging a company as holding company or deeming as subsidiary company, we need to take into consideration the provisions of subsection 3 of section 4. Let us go to subsection 4 of section 4. For the purposes of this act, again, for the purposes of this act, a company shall be deemed to be the holding company of another if, but only if, that other is its subsidiary. Very interesting and tricky. Again, repeat it. For the purposes of this act, a company shall be deemed to be the holding company of another if that other is its subsidiary. Subsection 5 of section 4. In this section, the expression company includes any body corporate, underline. In this section, the expression company includes any body corporate and the expression equity share capital as the same meaning as in subsection 2 of section 85. Why this expression body corporate is coming in subsection 5 of section 4? The definition, the meaning, as far as this Companies Act is concerned, we were referring in our earlier section also. Again, in this section, the expression company includes any body corporate. The definition, the meaning of any body corporate we were referring earlier, you may recollect. Subsection 6 of section 4. In the case of a body corporate, again, see the term body corporate getting repeated in subsection 6. In the case of a body corporate which is incorporated in a country outside India, a subsidiary of holding company of the body corporate under the law of such country shall be deemed to be a subsidiary or holding company of the body corporate within the meaning and for the purposes of this act also, whether the requirements of this section are fulfilled or not. last subsection 7 of section 4, a private company being a subsidiary of a body corporate incorporated outside India. Repeat. A private company being a subsidiary of a body corporate incorporated outside India, which if incorporated in India would be a public company, within the meaning of this act, shall be deemed for the purposes of this act to be a subsidiary of a public company. If the entire share capital in that private company is not held by that body corporate, whether alone or together with one or more other bodies corporate incorporated outside India. Here we need to conclude. Assume that there is a private company which is a subsidiary of a body corporate incorporated outside India. If the similar body corporate gets incorporated in India and it is treated as a public company as far as the meaning of this act is concerned, in such a situation, such a private company is deemed as a subsidiary of a public company. If the entire share capital in the private company is not held by that body corporate, whether alone or together with one or more other bodies corporate incorporated outside India. From subsection 4, we are able to understand how a company is deemed holding company and how a company is deemed subsidiary company. We were also having some illustrations which were enabling us to understand, to refresh our understanding about holding company and subsidiary company. Thank you, all of you.